We are a little bit different from the standard sessions in terms of timing. Standard sessions have 3 presentations. Ours only has 2. So that means we have a little bit more time per presentation. But I am keen to start with the first presentation as soon as possible, as yeah, we are already a little bit behind schedule. So we'll have 30 minutes of the first presentation, then 15 minutes of question and answer session, and then the second session with equivalent amounts of time. Without further ado, let me thank the first team for preparing their presentation on the Almaty-Bishkek economic corridor and on the prospects of tourism sector development in this corridor. And I'm happy to pass the floor to Kubat Umurzakov from NISS Kyrgyzstan on behalf of his team that also includes Bolotbek Oruzbaev from the Diplomatic Academy in Kyrgyzstan, Nurlan Kulbatyrov from QazTrade, and Aizhan Tulepbekova from QazTrade. Kubat, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Johannes. Let me start my presentation. Dear participants of the workshop, as well as panelists and organizers, this presentation is based on the study which was conducted by experts from Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. And also you see LiK Institute in this first slide. LiK Institute was the organizer and it provided financing. This study was conducted in the framework of grants program of LiK Institute. The theme of presentation is Almaty-Bishkek Economic Corridor, Prospects of Tourism Sector Development. This is a map of the area, which was the main area for our study. And first we will explain what is the Almaty-Bishkek Economic Corridor. After that, we will go to current trends in tourism in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. The third question which we will consider is assessment of impact of COVID-19. Next is prospects of tourism development in 2020-2030. And finally, we go to recommendations. Almaty-Bishkek Economic Corridor is a new economic corridor, and it started in 2014 when the countries agreed to start establishment of this corridor. And the main aim is to integrate the 2 cities, Almaty, Bishkek and surrounding areas, into one economic space, which will give the opportunities to find benefits, to exploit benefits of agglomeration and specialization. Priority sectors are agribusiness, logistics, transport, ICT, knowledge-based services, tourism, as well as health and education. Tourism development in ABEC is based on the idea of connecting 2 branches of Silk Road, and there are 6 clusters which are proposed to be established here. And this is a map of proposed clusters in ABEC region. And in master plan for tourism sector, which was prepared by international experts, there are several investment projects and some important proposals in this master plan. A set of reforms proposed, policy interventions will be implemented, and there are some other important.
Некоторые другие важные отрасли реформирования в регионе АБЭК. Следующее – это современные тенденции в туризме Казахстана и Кыргызстана. У нас презентация довольно-таки большая, я поэтому пройду кратко, остановлюсь на каждом из слайдов.
Like this, tourist arrivals, international tourist arrivals is one of important indicators, and you can see that in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, and also Uzbekistan, there was growing trend, like in total in the whole global tourism sector, and there are some figures, diagrams showing that contribution to tourism to GDP in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. From this table, you can see that Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are the figures are a little bit lower than average in the world, and Kyrgyzstan has some bigger figure than regional countries. It means that for Kyrgyzstan, development of tourism is more important than in other countries. Same is in contribution to employment. We can see from this next table, and there are also some other diagrams on export, investment in tourism sector, and so on. The next question is assessment of impact of COVID pandemic on tourism sector. Why we started to make this analysis? First was the aim was to develop scenarios for a period of 2020-2030, but because of latest developments which came to existence after we started this study. We started the study by beginning of March, and in the mid of March, pandemic cases were registered in both countries, in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and also this pandemic has changed the picture of economic development all over the world, and we decided to make assessment of impact of pandemic because we need to understand what are the emerging trends in post-COVID era. Particularly, we need to analyze developments in current year, in 2020, and we need to consider global economy scenarios and scenarios for tourism sector in the world, because development and future trends in tourism in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, they are dependent on the global tourism, on the global economy, future development, and so on. So we will consider scenarios for tourism, taking into account what are the trends in the global area. The COVID pandemic has led to deep global recession, and as you know, uncertain cause of pandemic has caused extraordinary uncertainty in the world in many sectors, and there is a big uncertainty about future trends, about duration of global recession, and so on. And all this we need to take into account. The first cases were detected in mid-March in both countries, though strict limitations on the movement of people and the requirements to abide by social distancing rules were introduced. After that, mostly in May and in June, there was some easing of restrictions and associated activation of economic activities. And this was contributing factor in the following spike in COVID infections. And again, countries introduced restrictive measures. And the most affected sectors in the economy were in Kazakhstan, tourism, services, trade, transport, and in Kyrgyzstan, tourism, trade, consumer services, and also construction. Negative impact on Kyrgyzstan's economy was more pronounced. GDP decreased in Kyrgyzstan in first 9 months of 2020 by 6%, while in Kazakhstan this figure was 1.8%. And from these diagrams you can see the new cases which were registered in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. So you can see that the highest level of them was, the peak was in Kyrgyzstan on 21st July and in Kazakhstan on 8th of August. So the difference is about 2 weeks. This diagram explains the logic how we calculated this impact of pandemic, and we identified impact on GDP and also impact on household consumption and on tax revenues. And we will see later the results in the following tables. An impact of COVID was calculated according to several scenarios. First scenario was...
Первый это предполагал оценку с учетом, потому что ограничения, связанные с COVID, они прекращаются во втором квартале. Если в третьем квартале, то это второй сценарий рассмотрения. И третий сценарий – это когда ограничения в четвертом квартале, то есть в конце года, если будут сняты. И на основе этих сценариев мы оценили воздействие прекращенного туризма на ВВП, и когда мы это посчитали, то мы брали во внимание ежеквартальную динамику по количеству туристов, которая очень сильно зависит от сезонности, и на этих предположениях мы исчисления произвели для своих сценариев. Дальше вы видите первые – это количество посетителей, визитеров. Это таблица по Казахстану. И сокращение в количестве международных туристов по первому сценарию 24%. По следующему сценарию это 57,7%. И по последнему сценарию это 81,2%. В процентном соотношении. Если ограничения будут продлены или прекращены только в конце года, то мы увидим сокращение на более чем 50%, 80%. И относительно ВВП, соответственно, в туризме был тоже рассчитан. По третьему сценарию около 50% сокращения на ВВП в секторе туризма. Эта таблица относится к воздействию на рост ВВП. Воздействие было рассчитано по туризму и некоторым другим сопутствующим, допустим, транспорт и складские, размещение и питание, развлечения и рекреационные услуги. В случае третьего сценария воздействие на ВВП будет минус 2,19%. То есть сокращение пойдет на минус 2,19. Также и, соответственно, будет снижение и в потребительстве на срезе домохозяйств. Также по налогам было рассчитано по 4 разным видам налогов. По Казахстану вот вы видели, а теперь такие же расчеты мы провели для Кыргызстана. Воздействие на ВВП, ВНП и на сбор налогов. Эта таблица скомбинирована по Казахстану и Кыргызстану, и вы можете увидеть, что сравнительно, да, какая у нас сокращение в количестве международных туристов, зарубежных иностранных туристов. Мы можем... Эти цифры, они основаны на 2 сценариях, 2 и 3. Если ограничения прекращаются в конце 2020 года, то сокращение количества туристов из-за рубежа будет в Кыргызстане около 88%, в Казахстане 81%. ВВП, рост в секторе туризма будет в Казахстане около 50%, а в Казахстане 43%. И сбор налогов тоже будет меняться. Если в целом вы смотрите на ВВП, на этих табличках, в этой табличке вы видите цифры. Итак, вот глядя на эти таблицы, можно увидеть общую целую картину по Кыргызстану, воздействие на те, которые мы обозначили темы. Дальше мы переходим к другой части нашей презентации. Как мы рассчитывали эти сценарии, когда мы смотрим на перспективы туристического сектора, мы принимаем во внимание сценариев для глобальной экономики и глобального туризма. Глобальная экономика, что восстановление будет сложным, медленным, не V-образным, а W, то есть английское V, потому что возможны повторения вспышки, дистанцирование, за ограничения. Это все особенно видно, заметно в Европе. Картина показывает, что количество случаев увеличивается, ограничения снова вводятся. Картина не очень благоприятна. И туристическая сфера, активность, она, конечно, была очень сильно подвержена воздействию. Лето, практически летний сезон был потерян. Путешественники не хотят выезжать, не активны. И большинство границ для международных туристов тоже закрыты. То есть в туризме картина печальная. Для ВВП вы можете увидеть в 2020-м последние проекции с Международного валютного фонда на 2020 год ожидают в Казахстане будет сокращено на 2,7%, а в Кыргызстане на 12%. И что важно, ВВП в 2021 году по сравнению с 2019 годом в Кыргызстане будет на 4% ниже, в Казахстане немножко больше 100%, а по всему миру это будет тоже, будут изменения, не такого большого роста не будет, в пределах 100%. Это все было взято во внимание, и в основном сценарии, в исходном сценарии предполагалось, что экономика за 4-5 лет будет восстанавливаться постепенно, это средний рост, и после этого постепенно будет подниматься, зависимо от того, как этот уровень на 2-3% может расти. По Кыргызстану и Казахстану тоже будет зависеть от глобальной экономики. По Кыргызстану факторы были тоже учтены при подготовке данных правительством по социально-экономическому развитию. И в 2024-2026 году ожидается рост и восстановление в зависимости от мер и ограничений, которые принимаются в связи с эпидемией. Это вот исходный сценарий, если мы возьмем. По Кыргызстану рост ожидается после достижения предкризисного и восстановится после 2024 года. Годовой рост с 25 до 30 тоже ожидается в рамках 3%. По оптимистическому сценарию восстановление в туристической сфере в 2021 начнутся и, следовательно, достигнут своего нормального уровня в Казахстане в 2022, а в Кыргызстане в 2023 году. Но мы, конечно, не настолько оптимистичны все-таки. В нашей позиции мы думаем, что большинство реальных изменений и проекций, которые мы сделаем на основе исходного сценария, они более реалистичны. На основе этого мы подготовили вот эти диаграммы. Значит, это по Казахстану количество туристов по Казахстану. Потом вот здесь вы видите цифры по региону Абек Казахстана. И это вот верхний прогноз, это по всей территории Казахстана. Это оптимистический прогноз проецирования. Вы можете видеть, что в первой бейзлайне в оптимистичной это линии, которые второго и третьего сценария. Q3 это второй сценарий, когда ограничения снимаются в третьем квартале, и Q4 это третий сценарий, когда ограничения будут сниматься в конце года. И также по другим цифрам эти обозначения. Вот оптимистический сценарий вы можете смотреть, но предкризисный уровень будет достигнут в 2021 году. По ВВП и по количеству туристов.
Kyrgyzstan diagrams, they are prepared in the same logic, and you can see that for gross value added and for number of tourists. Achievement of pre-crisis level in Kyrgyzstan is in 2025. And next is optimistic scenario, it will be in 2023. In summary of this, all of this, we can say that main distinction between this baseline scenario and optimistic scenario is in the period of recovery. So it is assumed that the number of tourists and gross value added in tourism will return to pre-crisis level in Kazakhstan in 26, 25, and in Kyrgyzstan in 25. In view of difficult financial situation and high debt burden, the forecast for Kyrgyzstan is rather moderate, and average growth rate in 2025-2030 is at 3%. And taking into account, government of Kazakhstan adopted a program for extensive development in tourism industry in 2020 and 2025. The growth rates for tourism are therefore projected for the last 5 years at 6.3 annually. This is in baseline scenario. In consideration of these different scenarios provides the room for better understanding of prospective future development of tourism sector in the period up to 2030. There are some recommendations.
I'm sorry to say we are at half an hour already, so let's please try to conclude this.
Finally, we provided these recommendations for relevant activities by governments and by business. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Sorry, I didn't mean that you should completely skip the recommendations. They are, after all, a key part of your presentation. Please take 1 or 2 minutes on these last 2 slides that you didn't cover right now.
Recommendations on state support, they are providing some insights. I think most of recommendations are there in different countries also. Made and are implemented, and this is mostly about support to business through loans and training and advisory support, and we need to subsidize the cost for purchase of equipment, consumables, and to cover other related costs to comply with new operating protocols. And also web-based courses will be to train on digitalization of tourism businesses. And also there is a need to launch a campaign to reinforce the country's positive images, to broadcast online virtual tours of site and interactions around countries in order to raise appetite and keep alive in memory with all these tours. And also, you know that interministerial tasks should be established. I think in most countries it was established to bring together public bodies, private sectors to work on.
Как работает частный сектор по восстановлению?
For tourism sector in ABEC region, it is recommended that because of very difficult situation and because of falling incomes affecting middle classes, particularly in neighboring countries. So most of investment projects which were envisaged in the framework of ABEC most probably will be deferred, and the implementation of them expected mostly after 3 or 5 years. So for countries, for governments, for businesses, and also for international organizations supporting this sector, it is necessary to work energetically on implementation on main reforms and investment projects, so that to move tourism sector from this post-crisis period and to implement these good ideas which were proposed in the framework of tourism sector master plan for Abek region. And also as representatives of think tanks, we propose to conduct more studies, conduct more research on the prospects of economic corridors, on development of priority sectors. Abek Almaty Bishkek economic corridor is the first economic corridor in Central Asia. So it is necessary to conduct research to understand better what will be impact of establishing major clusters in the framework of Abek. And the results of research to be discussed in seminars, conferences, to contribute to better understanding of benefits of establishment of Almaty Bishkek economic corridor. With this, I finish my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kubat. It seems that our participants are mainly Russian speakers, if I'm not mistaken. Я, наверное, не ошибаюсь, что вот участники у нас в основном русскоговорящие. То есть, может быть, мы вопросы все-таки создадим и на русском, и на английском. Пожалуйста, у кого есть замечания, у кого есть вопросы?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please go ahead, Bernard.
I was trying to raise my hand, but I don't know where I can raise my hands. So
it's in the panelist field, but please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting talk. You have the numbers that we didn't have, so it's very interesting for us because we didn't conduct such quantitative study. I wanted to ask you if you are aware of schemes that are being developed to help hotels deal with the new reality, because the COVID crisis is there to stay with us for, I would say, at least 1 year. It's not going to disappear that fast, and therefore hotels somehow will have to work next summer with certain specific, observing certain specific rules, hygiene rules, and etc. So and this wouldn't cost much, because the big problem is for governments to help the ailing hotel industry. And if you have a government that doesn't have money, and this is probably more the case in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, what else can you do that doesn't cost much money? And perhaps educating hotels.
Так много денег. Может быть, надо обучать эти отели, как справляться в этих условиях с новыми правилами, или знаете ли вы какие-нибудь материалы, которые бы помогли и в этой сфере полезными оказались бы? Я думаю, мистер Johannes знает лучше, чем я, потому что он представляет один из международных организаций, которые занимаются туризмом в Кыргызской республике, вопросами туризма. Поскольку я знаю, есть продолжающие тренинговые программы, курсы, и новые тоже программы в процессе разработки предлагаются. Большинство этих тренингов организуются не правительством. Правительство только требует. Донорские организации в большинстве случаев проводят помощь и тренинги. И у нас есть 3, 5, 6 международных организаций, которые непосредственно связаны с поддержкой туристических мероприятий через предоставление консультативных услуг, проведением тренингов и так далее. И в Кыргызстане Большинство со стороны международных организаций, конечно, это идет. В Казахстане ситуация другая, потому что Казахстан имеет деньги на это. Но в Казахстане, к сожалению, туристический центр не является приоритетным, а один из важных, но не приоритетным. Приоритеты все-таки в других у нас секторах в Казахстане. Но для Кыргызстана сектор туризма очень важен, потому что он имеет вклад и со стороны правительства тоже, и во многих регионах, отдаленных местностях, куда хотят путешественники поехать и увидеть дикую природу, горы, горные ландшафты. Они хотят видеть, как кыргызские люди живут в этих отдаленных местностях, высоко в горах. Это за 5-6 лет, конечно, интерес и туристическая привлекательность в этом плане возрастала в Кыргызстане, но сейчас мы не знаем, что будет дальше. Мы не знаем, может быть, в начале следующего года или в первом квартале мы увидим более благоприятную ситуацию в связи с ковидом. Дай бог, чтобы это было так, конечно. Спасибо большое за то, что вы сделали ссылку на наш проект в том числе. Конечно, Helvetas ведет 3 туристических проекта, и мы смотрим на конкретные.
So to name just some examples, we've been working with the government on an action plan for COVID recovery in the tourism sector, specifically focused on the upcoming winter tourism season. We have been working with the government on a winter tourism concept, which obviously over the coming years, you spoke of 2025 as possibly the time horizon when we might come out of the crisis. So clearly dealing with COVID has to be part of this tourism development concept over the coming years. And we have been working directly with stakeholders such as accommodation providers, but really with the entire HoReCa sector and with tour operators on dealing with the crisis, on the measures needed to be able to keep running businesses in this crisis environment. Any other questions? I see Craig's hand is up. Craig, can I ask you to take the floor?
Sure. Let me ask you, it's sort of a related question. And that is, what specific actions do you recommend, or that may be already in the pipeline, to instill a sense of I guess security and the quality of sanitation and hygiene when people visit these hospitality establishments?
There are many proposals in tourism society. As I understand from recommendations made by UN World Tourism Organization, one of good modalities would be this using of travel bubbles, so-called travel bubbles, when, for example, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan can establish a green corridor. So it is mostly related to countries with situation which is similar. So if there will be maybe, for example, 50% of population already experience this infection, in that case, maybe it will be a possibility to make intergovernmental agreement to start mutual this traveling of groups of tourists from Kazakhstan to Kyrgyzstan, from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan, which is more or less reliable, because I don't know when the borders of Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan will be open. We don't know exactly, maybe after 5 months, or nobody knows situation in Europe when it will be better, or still we have closed borders with China, for example. And for sanitation, for implementing these protocols, I think there could be used some usual measures, training and providing equipment and so on.
But I don't think it's just about training and equipment. It's about instilling in the customer a sense of faith and security. So how is that being, what are the plans to communicate that if you stay in this hotel or if you eat in this restaurant, that you won't be made sick? And if you are made sick, there's a backup plan for what they can help you with.
I think these hotel or Horeca businesses, they will be happy to implement these protocols when relevant travelers from, for example, Europe or China will come. But most of businesses, the latest survey conducted by some other organizations revealed that businesses, particularly from Horeca sector, they, after this pandemic, most of them, 75% of them, have not money. They cannot pay their, if they use some loans, they cannot pay for them. And the situation is very difficult. Unpredictable, because they don't know when travelers will come, after how months, half a year or 1 year. Or they are happy to implement these protocols, but they don't know when start this. But this will be important if the travelers will have confidence that all these protocols are implemented according to requirements, then it will be very good.
Thank you very much, Kubat. Obviously, it would be interesting to keep discussing. I'm just responding to a written question from Ivan in terms of alternatives for local people who were employed in tourism in Kyrgyzstan that they can switch to. But as we are already past 1845, I would like to give the floor to our second group of experts from the University of Central Asia in Chorog, also supported by Craig Webster from the Ball State University in the US. Jonna, please, the floor is yours again, and I'll switch my video off again. Thanks again, Kubat. I hope you stay with us, and I hope you join the discussion at the end of this presentation as well.
Желаем вам удачи, и мы еще будем.
Спасибо. Я хотела бы пригласить Крэга, чтобы он начал нашу презентацию.
All right. The slideshow doesn't work though. That's all right. Today we're going to talk about the nature and logic of quarantine tourism, and there's some observations about what's going on in terms of what's happened in. So what we have here is I've worked together with Bernard and Diaz to deal with this question of the nature and logic of quarantine tourism. There's some observations from the hospitality in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and the island of Cyprus. Now, in 2019, December, COVID-19 was identified. Governments around the world subsequently instituted a bunch of measures to contain the virus. There have been massive reductions in occupancies in hotels, nothing surprising, I think we all know this. This paper is not about the impact of the virus on the hotel industry. Instead, it's looking at how industry and the state responded to deal with hosting guests and putting them under quarantine. This tells us a great deal about how government works and how civil society and corporate responsibility works. First of all, tourism and the pandemic. Tourism is a massive industry in the world. It's responsible for about 10% of global economic activity. In the countries we look at, there's some pretty interesting stuff. First of all, we noticed that in some of these countries, the tourism sector is much more massive or important for the economy than in others. For example, on the island of Cyprus, both of the political entities there, they have massive numbers of tourists per inhabitant. We see this in contrast to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, in which tourism does not play as massive a role in the economy. So the other issue is that we have some other issues about that COVID came almost the exact time, the same time in these countries. There are differences in terms of when they reacted in a few days, but for the most part, this is a pandemic that hit these countries almost exactly the same time. What we know about the islands is you have, or these countries under consideration, is you have two political entities. They have big tourism industries relative to the other countries. You also have a different political culture, since Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are newer states and they evolved out of the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And in sort of the background of this is this happened really at the same time. Now I'll flip this over to Bernard, who will discuss the next issue.
Thank you. Right now I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you will see the presentation. Okay, so we first looked at what the literature had to say on this topic. Obviously, there is a substantial amount of literature that deals with the effects of issues such as political conflict or natural disasters or crime, etc., on tourism, how these various shocks will affect tourism and hospitality. So there is a lot of literature on that. But when you come closer to what our topic of interest was, we didn't find very much, except perhaps what has been published as a follow-up of the SARS outbreak in 2003, where there was some literature on how this affected the tourism and hospitality sector. But we found very little literature on how what the role of the hotels was in such a crisis situation. And here I will show you two papers that we found that were closely related to what we want to talk about. The first one was about the hotel industry in Hong Kong and how they developed best practices to face the SARS epidemic. But again, this doesn't address the issue that we are interested in, which is how hotels have contributed with the government to quarantine guests. The only paper we found on this topic is a paper that was just a letter, actually it's 2 pages, published about in April, on how in Singapore, and Singapore with Australia is one of the countries that implemented the quarantine to hospitality scheme we will be talking about. And we see here there were 12,000 hotel rooms, so that's pretty big. What we are going to talk about is not of that same size. So we found no other academic publications that would talk about the role of government, central government, municipal authorities, or the role of hotels in quarantining guests, passengers returning home, or medical staff. So we think there's a gap in the literature which we would like to address here. So our study is based on 4 case studies, 2 in Europe and 2 in Central Asia. And I will start here presenting the case of the Republic of Cyprus. Then I will talk about Northern Cyprus to complete the island of Cyprus. Then our colleague Diaz will talk about Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And Greg will then come back to wrap up with discussions and recommendations and conclusions. Now, do you actually see my picture?
Yes.
Because
as in the presentation. It's not a picture, it's the case of the Republic of Cyprus.
You don't see me talking. Okay. I'm just because I don't see myself. So anyway, it's not important, but as long as you can see the slides, that's what counts. So in Cyprus, the situation started immediately after the government had to stop the flights connecting the island. And as soon as normal flights were stopped, the government had to organize special charter flights to bring back the residents. And one of the big group of people that needed to come back to Cyprus were students who were studying abroad. There are thousands of young people from Cyprus studying mainly in the UK and Europe. And initially, the first 2 flights were actually paid by the government, but subsequently the government asked people to pay for their own ticket. I'm talking here about the flight. So each flight would cost about 300 euro. There's a one-way flight that were a chartered flight. But the government would take up on its shoulder the cost of accommodation, because a flight meant that a group of 160 people, because they wouldn't fill the flights totally, 160 people had to be allocated or accommodated in a hotel and for 14 days, and that was paid by the government. There were other costs, transfer costs, security costs. If you take all these costs, the government told us that each flight would cost them about 100,000 euro. And the scheme was actually there to solve a public health issue, and it was not meant to be a subsidy for the hospitality or hotel industry, which was experiencing great difficulties at that time because of the fact that there were no tourists. So how would things work? You would arrive at the airport with those special flights. You would be then escorted by the police into a bus, and you can see it here on the picture. And then the bus would drive you to your hotel, where you will be accommodated for 14 nights. The hotels were receiving 60 euro from the government per person per night. That would include 3 meals and a single room, 90 euro for a double room where a couple could stay. And then around the hotel, you would have the army patrolling to make sure that, you know, there was a certain legitimization of authority from the state, and to make sure also we were told that family would not come and visit, because family would tend to come and visit their children, the students I talked about earlier on. So what motivated hoteliers to do all this? Well, they all told us that they were motivated by altruistic reasons, by the fact that they wanted to help their country in need, and they didn't at all consider this as a business. They would see this as a civic act, and they, you know, part of their corporate social responsibility duty towards society. And There were absolutely no problems for hotels to convince their employees. The employees were very fearful in the beginning because nobody really knew how dangerous it was to go and work in a hotel where potentially there could be many people infected. But the employees followed the managers and owners of the hotels and were very willing to collaborate. The whole scheme lasted until the 21st of May, about 70 days in total. There were 12 hotels initially that participated, and then this grew to 37 hotels. And the whole scheme was then stopped when normal flights started to operate to the island of Cyprus. Yes, I saw that perhaps you read that. The only problem that this scheme encountered were actually the parents. That's a very funny anecdote that were bombarding the call center that had been set up by the Ministry of Health with very silly requests. And they were doing this also, I was told, on the private mobile number of the lady who was in charge. I interviewed her. And I can tell you that even if you don't eat fish, there was excellent food available. And these are some of my own picture because I had the pleasure of spending 14 nights in a hotel. And those are the good memories I have from. So we must say the hotels were amazing. They did everything they could to provide an excellent service to their guests. You can read here all the things they did. The experience was extremely positive. Guests were leaving the place very happy, feeling secure and safe. And of course, hotels used this for marketing purposes and then invited those guests and passengers to come back and see them during the holiday. For most of them, it didn't, well, for some of them it happened, but you know, since the virus was still there, it wasn't really an option either. What did the hotels gain from this experience? Well, they all said that this was extremely useful for them to get acquainted with the new regulations, the new procedures, protocols that will be needed in this post-COVID times. We had until 2 weeks ago in Cyprus very, very low infection rates, and so that you know went very well together with the experience of the hotels individually. And then if you look at in the long term, what the hotel industry can learn from this experience is that perhaps can learn from this experience that it's an opportunity for innovation in more authentic tourism, where higher quality guests or discerning tourists would be led to appreciate authentic things like nature, the sea, the beauty, and where hotel facilities would come at the background and not be that important, because anyway, who wants to go in a jacuzzi or a sauna nowadays? You know, people would not dare to go there because of the infection danger. So it's a good opportunity. It's a window of opportunity to come up with this new product, which is a tourism experience, authentic experience. So that leads me to the second part of Cyprus, the case of Northern Cyprus, where in Northern Cyprus, everything happened very fast. And everything happened at this beautiful hotel, which is in the Famagusta region, called the Salamis Bay Hotel, where suddenly 18 German tourists who were staying there were tested positive. And so the authorities decided to immediately close the hotel, and 750 tourists who were staying there subsequently had to stay there for 2 weeks. So in a sense, the government, the authority there were pushed because of the urgent necessity to deal with the problem. And it's only later that other hotels, big hotels, because there are huge hotels there, luxury 5-star casino hotels that also came into play. The government then at a later stage also declared that it would pay for the accommodation. And then you had these hotels also contributing to the effort, as you can see on the slide here. So there was a strong collaboration between hoteliers and the government. I think that that is logical because the hoteliers are extremely powerful and rich and influential, and perhaps more than the government itself, and therefore it does not come as a surprise. In Northern Cyprus, they did quite well actually until July. Very few cases. It seems that the scheme was working rather well, and it was extended up to September. Why was it also important? It was important because in Northern Cyprus, there are many universities. Actually, for a population of 300,000 people, you have 120,000 foreign students. It's enormous. And there it was also very important to make sure these students can come back to the island to attend university. Apart from a published testimony of a journalist who was recalling her ordeal and where things went totally wrong, it seems that from the secondary data that we collected, that the process was reasonably well managed and that there was a good collaboration between private and public sector. And I think that's very important because, as Greg mentioned before, this is a country where tourism and higher education are the only sources of income, and therefore in the creation of value. And so it was crucial for them to manage it well, and I think they did. So here I will say goodbye to you. Thank you for listening to me, and I will pass on to Diaz, who will talk about the Central Asian case studies. Thank you so much.
So hello, dear attendees. By referring to the case of Kazakhstan, I'd like to mention that we identified many different individual cases of Kazakhstan-based hotels and hostels involved in quarantine hospitality schemes across the country. For instance, quarantine measures which took place in a local hotel of the city of Kapchigai, or a story from the capital city, Nur-Sultan, where the 5-star Hilton Hotel hosted around 500 people for quarantine purposes. However, our research in Kazakhstan was primarily focused on the two cities of Tekeli and Almaty. Despite the fact that these two cities are only a few hundred kilometers apart from each other within the same country, they've experienced very different approaches to create and implement an action plan for quarantine hospitality. So we initially contacted the representatives of the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs and the head of the Hotel Association, who helped us identifying 7 hotels and hostels operating as a quarantine hospitality facilities in the city of Almaty. Sorry?
Yeah, you're doing very well. Yeah, we
I just heard some noises. All right.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So surprisingly, it appeared that only one institution out of the 7 has survived the crisis. So 6 hotels were forced to shut down permanently. Preliminary reports indicate that the limited support from local administration was not sufficient to keep the hotels afloat. In other words, it appears that the hotels used the quarantine purposes did not have sufficient financial reserves to perform their newly assigned duties. In addition, there were also cases of contamination of staff, which led to a situation in Almaty hotels where employees simply refused to work under a risky environment. So let me bring an example of one of our interviews with the hotel owners in Almaty. According to the owner, the accommodation costs were not fully covered by the local administration. The respondent explained that the cost of hosting one person for one day was 14,000 Kazakh tenge, which is equivalent of around $33 US, while the hotel operators were receiving only 5,000 tenge, which is equivalent of $12 US. Therefore, after hosting these guests for about 10 days without external financial support, the hotel had to shut down and incurred losses reaching up to 1 million tenge, which is equivalent of $2,300 US. However, the story of the city Tekeli was very different. To be specific, in the case of Tekeli, 3 hotels were involved in hosting local medical staff with a very positive outcome, surpassing the most favorable expectations. In case of Tekeli, local citizens were very proactive and showed strong civic involvement. Locals and entrepreneurs offered their time, food, and places to stay. What is most important to note here is that the voluntary assistance provided by the local people was appreciated by the relevant local administration, and the owners of the hotels were actually fully compensated by the local government budget. So this is a remarkable example of a bottom-up self-help behavior by the local community combined with official support from the administration. Besides these 3 hotels, we identified a local college which offered their student dormitories for the quarantine hospitality without requesting any financial support from the government. After conducting an in-person interview with the head of the Tekeli College, we've discovered that this action was driven by a single motivation, which is to help people during difficult times. Having said about at this stage, we have at least highlighted that within a single country, there were different realities for quarantine guests, different levels of involvement of local and national authorities, different experiences for all hoteliers, local citizens, and guests. So moving further to the accommodation service quality itself, we have not identified...
You have another 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So we did not identify any major drawbacks from the hotels and hostels involved into quarantine hospitality. Looking at the slides, on the left is showing one of the Tekeli hotels involved, and on the right, you may find one of the Almaty hotels involved. Obviously, all of the sanitary measures set by the Ministry of Healthcare had to be implemented for these hotels to be allowed to operate during a pandemic. Further, we have a case of another Central Asian country, which is Kyrgyzstan. Most of the hotels and hostels were forced to stop their operation due to the pandemic and absence of foreign tourist arrivals, which led to tremendous financial losses to all of them. However, there were still cases across the country when the hotels were used for quarantine hospitality. For instance, the owner of one of the hotels in the city of Osh has converted his hotel into an observation center. And we had a lot of cases like that, but for the purposes of our research, we chose the capital city, Bishkek. Based on the collected data, out of more than 140 hotels and hostels in Bishkek, only 3 major hotels were allowed to operate during pandemic. Hotels Dostok, Akeme, and Garden. The last 2 are depicted on the slides. So these hotels were hosting passengers coming from Egypt, Thailand, mainly from Russia, and all of them were collaborating with the government. However, the level of collaboration was not sufficient to cover all of the losses as well.
Все расходы. Позже эпидемиологическая ситуация стала еще хуже, и правительство Кыргызстана решило размещать людей или на самоизоляции, или в больнице, исходя из статуса, так сказать, здоровья у людей, потому что были ограничения. Это времени. Ну, опять-таки, это вот та информация, которая есть, которая касается ситуации по туризму в Кыргызстане и Казахстане. Я сейчас не буду говорить о больших деталях, исходя из того времени, которое нам дано сейчас. Я думаю, что следующее выступление. Может быть, несколько минут я бы хотел бы взять для того, чтобы я свою презентацию, которую я постараюсь сделать очень быстро. Мы на 4 разных политических, так сказать, единицы и различные уровни координации между заинтересованными сторонами. Это тоже роль центрального и местных правительства. И опять-таки, есть следующий уровень, например, роль ательеров и менеджеров гостиниц. Есть очень много доказательной базы для того, чтобы показать, что если говорить о корпоративно-социальной ответственности, это является мотиватором или, может быть, социальной ответственностью для того, чтобы работать с правительством и чтобы корпоративный туризм работал. Ну, нас мотивировали, что показали энтузиазм, у них была мотивация, и опять-таки здесь мы говорим о социальной ответственности, но точно так же мы наблюдаем и реакцию со стороны правительств. Например, в Кипре правительство играло основную роль, я имею в виду центральное правительство, а в Кыргызстане и Казахстане были различные уровни правительства и различные уровни вовлеченности в решение этой проблемы. Есть различные причины, объясняющие это. Центральноазиатские страны в этом исследовании не имеют такого фестивальной индустрии туризма по сравнению с островом Кипра. Ну, может быть, это объясняется историей и географическим расположением. Потому что мы говорим, например, о правительствах, которые отреагировали. И очень важно, чтобы были, так сказать, соответственно, менеджеры, которые в гостиничном секторе. Но если опять-таки взять реакцию со стороны Кипра и гражданскую войну 1974 года, мы должны, может быть, это был размер острова, который помог, так сказать, сделать чудеса, которые оказались очень важными. Опять-таки, очень большая туристическая инфраструктура, которая имеется здесь, которая помогла, так сказать, скоординировать все эти необходимые шаги и реакцию на ситуацию. А то, что касается Кыргызстана и Казахстана, одним из вопросов, который создавал трудности, это география этих стран. И, может быть, еще не та большая роль, которую играет туризм в этих странах. И какова же роль правительства в будущем, то, что касается подготовки подобного рода вещам, какого рода уязвимости есть в этом секторе, и каким образом правительство работает для того, чтобы быть готовым работать в таких ситуациях. Ну, это вот информация, которую я хотела вкратце с вами поделиться. Если есть у вас вопросы, мы стараемся на них. Спасибо большое, Крейг. Да, и вы действительно выдержали то время, которое вы попросили.
Questions. Let me quickly see whether any hands are raised. My own is. Let me lower that. Questions, comments, contributions. Obviously, we're mainly interested in attendees rather than keeping the discussion among panelists. But if nobody is ready to...
Если никто не готов, чтобы начать задавать вопросы или комментарии, тогда я вернусь к слайду номер 7.
To the academic literature,
где говорится об академической литературе,
of
и охват ситуации, подобной этой. Опять-таки, ситуация COVID-19 достаточно уникальна, потому что она как бы проявлена глобально, и она везде оказала воздействие на туризм.
So obviously you also looked at SARS, but
конечно, мы рассматриваем еще вопросы SARS, это тяжелый острый респираторный синдром.
There is the word disaster in
слово еще бедствие, катаклизмы, но вы это смотрели не только в плане здоровья, но и
industry. Or if you stick to health, things like malaria, which obviously doesn't move around as much and tends to have a defined area it affects, but cholera, for instance, might have more of a changing pattern. And obviously conflict might be something with an unexpected onset and a similar kind of impact. So,
yeah, thank you, Johannes, for this comment. We didn't go as far as that because we were focusing on the specific topic, which is how governments and hotels were working together to host incoming passengers and quarantine them. And in fact, we also discovered that these quarantine hotels were also used for medical staff. And that was the case in Kazakhstan and in other countries I read. So to what extent can hotels host people who need to be quarantined? That was the topic.
Right, and it's clear that again this is distinct from other examples we might have. It also seems clear that with the crisis only really taking off from the end of the first quarter 2020, that it's a little early, and I'm sure we will see more literature over the coming months. One case I remembered myself was in former Yugoslavia, Croatia and Slovenia more specifically, during the Yugoslav war in the 1990s, where there were big inflows of refugees. But again, of course, there are very different factors at play there, but I'm sure you could find things on that kind of situation in the literature.
Johannes, there's a huge literature about political shocks and other shocks and how they influence tourism flows. One of the greatest things that we know about tourism is that tourists tend to avoid places that are associated with negative things, whether it's civil war, human rights abuses, bad governance, health risks. People tend to avoid those places, and there's huge databases that support that. There's also a growing literature on biosecurity, and there's a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of research on grapes and the impact of, sort of spreading diseases to places like vineyards. And there's also some concern about foot and mouth disease, and there were some issues with that in recent years with hoof and mouth disease, I think, and some other issues that are biosecurity in nature. So I mean, the tourism has studied a lot of these issues quite a bit. And this article is a little bit different, or this discussion that we're having is a bit different because we're really focused on hoteliers and what they do. But there's massive stuff that deals with how people avoid crisis areas, how they avoid things that are generally associated with negative things for the prevailing tourism flows, and how economic shocks or biological shocks like SARS impacts upon tourism flows.
You actually made the point in the earlier discussion that what's most interesting to us are the lessons that might be drawn and the steps ahead in terms of how we can help our host economies overcome the crisis. And yeah, I do think there's quite a lot there in your article, and I'm sure you will find more going forward.
Well, I think they're, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I have a question later on, but go ahead. I have a question.
Да, у меня тоже есть вопрос, но я задам его позже. Я думаю, что важно, это вопрос безопасности с точки зрения, так сказать, потребителя, клиента. И вот что меня здесь волнует, это не просто, что это проверка гигиены или санитарии, но как бы физические признаки, которые показывают, которые напоминают туристу, что это место следует определенным правилам, контролю для обеспечения безопасности, для того, чтобы туристы, например, знали, что это место безопасное, что проводится необходимое инспектирование, чтобы исследовали, так сказать, определенным, это просто протоколом, но визуально видно, или как бы, чтобы люди чувствовали себя более безопасно.
With categorization of health risks. For years, Kyrgyzstan has been in one of the highest risk categories for health risk for travelers. Yeah, for me, in our project, that has been a key issue to work on in terms of the international perception and in terms of the impression tourists get in that direction.
I wanted to ask a question to Kubat and go a bit horizontally here. Kubat, I was interested in what you said about Kazakhstan, because when Diaz went to Almaty and came back from Almaty and told me that, look, Bernard, I have surveyed the 7 hotels that were involved, but they don't exist anymore. I kind of told him, I'm sorry, Diaz, this is not possible. Are you sure you're talking about the same thing? Now, but I was reconforted to hear similar stories coming from your analysis. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that, because this is quite incredible.
You told that there were hotels which...
Сказали, что были гостиницы, которые сейчас как бы уже не существуют, да? А Диас, может быть, вы тогда скажете, потому что это нечто такое особенное. Ситуация была такой, что эти гостиницы не могли вывести давление кризиса.
Due to heavy financial losses. So basically, this quarantine, this pandemic situation has dramatically affected the tourism sector as a whole, but hotels who are oriented on tourists were kind of suffering the most. That's why, based on our interviews, we have identified that only 1 out of 7 hotels which were operating during the pandemic have survived. And this is quite shocking, because this is a huge losses for the businessman located in Almaty, unlike in Tekeli, for example, where they have managed to survive and to operate, and they're still kind of keeping themselves afloat.
We were conducting a survey, but it was in March and April, in the beginning of crisis. And many respondents, they were thinking that they may survive or may not survive. They were not deciding, and they do not know the future. But now I think at least some of them, maybe half of them, are in very critical situation. Because recently I have seen the survey which was conducted beginning of October or end of September. They cited that more than 75% of businesses are on the verge of closing because they have not means, they have not money, and they have very big areas, and they do not know how to survive. And the situation is such that nobody can promise them any support because the situation is very uncertain.
Well, I'd hate to close on that note. We do have another 3 minutes officially. Again, I think the main benefit of this session overall is that hopefully we've shared a little bit more about how we can contribute to Kyrgyzstan mainly overcoming this crisis in the tourism sector. And while the challenges are enormous, I think a key element to try and focus on is how Kyrgyzstan may be
каким образом Казахстан может отличаться от других туристических направлений.
Presentation to hear reference to the fact that 70% of the turnover is estimated to be in the informal sector in Kyrgyzstan. And while that poses huge problems on a whole range of issues, including health standards, for instance, it does paradoxically lead to a resilience. The overheads are therefore so much lower that the percentage of companies that has actually been able to shut down completely does seem to be smaller, even though we do have similar numbers in the surveys that we also conducted along with IFC in this direction. So yeah, maybe I can throw this open as one last question to the panelists. What do you see as the main hope we can grasp, the main elements we can build on for Kyrgyzstan to overcome the crisis?
At least 3 crises of very big damages, and every time people are surviving, but some businesses are closed, some new businesses will appear, and that's all, because we are not expecting some big support from any countries or any organizations. They will provide some support, but what we need to do, we need to do ourselves all these things.
And I very much look forward to discussing that directly. Hopefully, would be very nice if we can maybe have a direct discussion next week. I will be heading to Karakol tomorrow, but I'll be back in Bishkek.
I would envy you to go to Karakol. There's some snow already there, so
it is snowing tonight, actually.
But okay, look, I'm very interested in what you said. I'm new into the tourism sector in the region. I know very little about it. I didn't know what you said about the informal sector. It's very important. I guess that you're talking about the site services, perhaps not the hotels, of course, they have to be formal because they are physically there, but perhaps the restaurant, horeca, transportation, guides, etc. My immediate thought would be that people doing the work that you do, from what I understand, you are on the ground, can help this formal and informal sector to rebound very quickly. And me too, I would like to talk to you later on because I think we have perhaps things we can do together. And I was very pleased to meet both you, Kubat, and Johannes on this occasion because, being based in Khorok, there's a lot to do there in the Pamir Mountains, together with Diaz and Greg now, who is coming from far away, but is interested in Central Asia. So it's hopefully the beginning of a great collaboration to come. Thank you so much for this session.
Well, that really is a great closing statement, and I'll very happily take that. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your contributions, and all the best for the rest of the conference and for your further work.